oats. What was it? Cereal. The oat cereal. That was not streamed, so we're safe.
No.
We probably will not be kicked off YouTube. But just know, everyone, you missed
You missed a hell of a pre-show.
Variety of topics that should never see the light of day.
Yeah.
But just to clarify, nobody from Air was ever married to Sofia Coppola.
Oh, good. That's good to know. That was the third part of our conversation.
Some people wonder why we don't stream everything, and I think that statement right there.
I was right before we started pre-streaming, during the pre-free stream, I was saying that I was trying to teach my daughter Alejandra the idiom. I like discovering. Not discovering, but coming across idioms that I don't really think of as idioms. And I was teaching her the one, put that in your pipe and smoke it. And I was like, I don't know if people say this very often anymore, but like, here's what this means. I was trying to, let me ask you two. So when I think that's a phrase we're all kind of, we encounter that phrase. I don't know if the kids do nowadays, but what do you think someone means when they say, put that in your pipe and smoke it? Matt, you go first.
Jeez. I mean, I'm gonna dodge that question. And
is there an Australian version?
No, well, maybe.
Stick that in front of you, weed whacker.
Oi.
It seems simple enough. Seems like, hey, take this piece of information and like do what.
We understand the meaning, but I mean, I'm trying to like ponder over like the origin of the phrase.
I don't know the origin. Well, that would
that's
but just the meaning, just like explaining the meaning, because it's. I mean, Brandon is. I feel like that's very close, but there's almost like a sarcastic sucker punch thing to it.
It's
right?
almost
something like
I agree.
Here's something you may or may not like, but you're gonna have to have it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right? Which when you talk about the smoke it thing, you're like, are you telling me you're going to drug me with something that I might not like?
Right.
I think it's more like digested or comprehended. It's like, here's a piece of information you probably didn't know. It might
not sit well.
That maybe not sit well with you, but you got to like accept it, right?
Yeah.
Like them apples.
Okay.
It's a little bit of like, and maybe it was sort of like, maybe someone made a strong point and you're like countering it in a way. Like, see, you didn't want to hear this, but turns out X is actually true.
So it's kind of a shade of like, you got to eat your vegetables. Just like, here's a thing you don't want to do. That's not actually correct, but yeah. Okay.
Hey, Coach, we're talking here, like maybe one notch down on the on the gain. Does it sound a little loud to you, Matt, or is it just me?
I was hearing a little bit of something, but I don't.
He did get a little bit, got a little bit on top of the mic, just like one notch.
All right. How is this better?
I think it's good.
Anything? I've got a mysterious AV problem before we start, and that is this new microphone that I've gone over before, maybe in our pre-show. Like, it works totally fine in Zoom, recording in QuickTime, here in Restream, but in StreamYard, it creates this like clicking noise. And I don't know what's going on with that. So I might have to switch back to my old mic.
Well, or say goodbye to StreamYard. Does StreamYard, are they still doing well, or were they the ones that like got sold? I can't remember.
Yeah, they got lost in some acquisition hole.
Oh. All right. Well, maybe they'll come over to the Restream. Move over to Restream, Coach. You can tell them this is the perfect platform.
It's what we use. Yeah, it's what we use for streaming at work. And let me tell you, no one wants to start that procurement process up again.
That's right. Like StreamYard will be a defunct company, but you'll still keep it going. The contract will keep going.
Man.
All right, Coach, hey, let's get going, man, whenever you're ready.
All right. We can just jump into the news because all right. Well, if we've learned anything over the years, it's that if you're not using Google's developer toolchain and platform, you're just losing out on awesomeness. I think maybe what the next time that I mean, I should probably be careful because who knows, maybe I'll be working there in like 30 to 60 days if necessary. But like, it seems like what Google needs to do is stop like fucking around and just open source its internal toolchain and platform. Now, one could say that this is some sort of differentiating advantage that they have, but like, no, Because it seems like anyone who has ever worked at Google, they're just like, oh my God, the tool chain in here is so awesome. And then the odd thing is, you hear about. I mean, I don't actually like know the tool chain. I mean, as I'm fond of saying, since 2005, I haven't programmed. I can align stuff in PowerPoint perfectly. You know, you do the thing.
That's a skill.
Let me just as a slight digression. Now, maybe I'm going to ask Brandon this. Maybe Matt, you have some opinion, but if you have a 2x3 grid of images, Brandon, on a slide, do you align vertically first or horizontal first? You know, you're going to want to align them all perfectly. And
I would.
Which way are you going to go?
Are they all the same size?
Yeah, let's say you're doing the NASCAR look at the logos of customers that we have slide, right? And so they're all squares. Could be transparent. I don't know.
I would probably lay them out horizontally and get them all, and then from there I'd kind of figure out what kind of vertical look I want. Like, kind of am I like a 2/3, a halfway? Like, how am I trying to, like, you know?
I'm just saying it. Like, let's say you've got a 2x3, right? Like, here's what I would do is I am going to lay them out roughly 3 on top, 3 on bottom, and then I'm going to align middle each column, each of the 3 columns, right? And then I'm going to go in and then I'm going to align. The two. What am I going to do? I'm going to do the next layer of
What are you doing?
2 rows, 2 columns.
Yeah, because you want them perfectly aligned, and then you might even have a nested group and a big group there. I don't know, but you know. So anyway, so that's the kind of stuff that I work on. But it seems like also when I hear about the Google tools and the platform, it breaks every single rule that you learned about programming and definitely about enterprise sales. Number 1 rule is lock-in. Apparently, lock-in is terrible and bad. But it seems like if you build your own custom tool chain and your own custom stack, like,
you're allowed to lock yourself into yourself.
Yeah, you've not only locked yourself into yourself, but you're also writing your own tools, which is also like just completely your own tools based on like non-proprietary technology that's not open source. Now, despite this, it seems like they're doing great. Now, of course, what I'm alluding to is I think there was is it Steve Yagi? He has a good complaint that GitHub is awful, and that, you know, it's better to have the tool chain that's in Google or the one that they're trying to replicate at a startup, which is fine. You know, I respect marketing.
But I think the thing I think is really interesting about his latest rant. One, I'm always up for a rant where someone thinks Git is awful, because that just aligns with my thinking. So 100% confirmation bias, even though I know everyone uses it quite a bit. But like, so he was doing that rant, but the part he kind of got off on that was interesting was, to your point, like, all the dev tools at Google are awesome. But then he actually went on to say some stuff about specifically around how easy it is to navigate a very large code base there. So that was sort of like the benefit. He was saying that, like, you know, they have this massive code base, but you can navigate it very, very quickly. And, you know, at least according to him, that's what allows them to kind of scale and to keep doing things, is that you can, like, if you will, on ramp onto the Google code base very, very quickly and learn it, because they have these great tools. And so one of my thoughts was just sort of like, because there's often this things like, wow, Google has a lot of people. What are they doing? Right. I think you kind of hear that sometimes, but it's sort of like, if you do hire, especially a lot of computer science, like PhD, like kind of people, and you kind of turn them loose on lots of different kind of tooling questions, because you have such a high profit margin in other businesses, it does seem like you come out with world-class tools, and that's fine in your business because you're so profitable. Like, to your point, to your original point, Cote, it's like, it's totally fine to be locked in, right? It's like you have the money, the time, and you have the experts, so that it's actually not, it's almost like you don't even want to call it lock in. It's like you're building exactly what you need. You can afford it. And like, why wouldn't you just keep doing this forever? Which seems to be kind of where they're at.
Now, exactly, and I want to chase this rabbit or headless robot dog, as the case may be, a little bit further. And it seems like, now I don't know how manufacturing works, but it seems like to me that your manufacturing process, like down to the factory floor, there are several instances where it's probably highly proprietary, and that manufacturing process is part of your business. Like, I mean, I think Apple's manufacturing process is pretty proprietary, right? At least at some point, I remember they used to like lease the machines that they would sell to factories to build the things or something, right?
Well, maybe just to jump in there, maybe TSMC, right? The people that build the
Yes.
chips, like they are the ones that have the expert manufacturing process that cannot easily be replicated. And maybe we'd say Apple has this incredible design lead. You know,
right.
I mean,
And
TSMC is practically like a public cloud at this point, where the barrier to entry is so high for a competitor. You know, you need to show up with tens of billions of dollars to be serious. I mean, you know, Intel's going through that right now, trying to enter this. They're not going to get a lot of, you know, ground up competition for 3 nanometer, you know, chips. That's just not happening.
Yeah, and so there is a type of successful strategy. Now, as always, we need to have the halo effect footnote of like, how many thousands of applications of this strategy do we just not hear about that utterly failed? But whatever. So there is a type of successful strategy where you have completely proprietary, unique to you, totally built up a stack that you use, right? And then so I think the question becomes like, so when do you reach that analysis versus using even open source stuff that's freely available, or, you know, off the shelf things, right? Like, is there some point where, like, let's pick the obvious ones that had the money, that you're a gigantic, one of the top 10 banks in the world, and something switches in your head and you're like, oh, we should just be writing all of our own stack, including the IDE and the version control system, because that's going to allow us to like be so good at software that like we are going to profit from it. I mean, like, you know, if you remember Mick Kirsten's Flow book, it's interspersed with these. This must have been the best way to do a tax write-off of going to buy a BMW or something. But it's interspersed with these anecdotes of him visiting the BMW factory in Germany, which seems like this totally bespoke custom factory for building their cars, right? And so in that case, maybe it's like, well, yeah, they're building cars. But like, you know, if every company, as we learned 5 or 8 years ago, is a software company, then it's sort of like, well, in the same way that BMW or TSMC or whatever, like builds up their stack and their tool chain and it's proprietary, like, should you be doing that like Google? Or is Google like this strange anomaly? And unless you have kind of a, not to be all whatever, but a whatever the non-legal word for monopolist is, but unless you have like such a stranglehold on the global advertising market that you just like make money without even trying.
You can say Facebook if you're tired of saying Google.
That's a good question. It's like, does Facebook follow the same pattern?
Yes, they do.
Right?
Yeah,
absolutely. We should say it this way. We should say, using the more generic business terms, it's like, when is vertical integration better than kind of the traditional horizontal? Because that's kind of what, you know, in the case of Apple, right? They've essentially own, you know, most of all the processes, even though they outsource to TSMC, right? They still design all their own chips. They want to build all their own things, and they're even always trying to build more things. Like they want to get rid of the modem, they want to get rid of the Bluetooth controller. So in that case, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's like a chicken or egg thing. It's like, once you kind of have a flywheel rolling and you are very profitable, and maybe this applies back to Google, it's like you do ultimately have to decide, like, well, with my profits, the profits that I'm not returning to shareholders, where should I invest? And I don't know. In the case of Google,
well,
I don't know if it's so much deliberate or has it just happened over time. It's like they hired a lot of very smart computer science people. They did face unique challenges at scale. So there wasn't an obvious way that they could do it go all the way back to like 2005 or whatever, right? So they did need to solve these problems themselves. And now they've been working on them for 2 decades. And now they do have this great vertical integration of tools. At least, I don't know. I feel like, and maybe this is just a quick aside, like, I don't know if they'll ever do it, but it'd be great for them to do like a YouTube video of like, here's all the great tools we have, because like everyone leaves and says they're awesome. I would love to see what they would show.
Well, I mean, so every enterprise it comes up to that line of build versus buy. And in this case, you know, today the answer is build versus buy versus, you know, use something open source and adapt to your needs. And so that line of build versus, you know, acquire externally kind of keeps moving as more open source is coming out of larger organizations, like, you know, a Kubernetes, for example. Now nobody has to think about what's our data center operating system. But there's, you and the judgment they're having to make is this something that moves our company forward faster? Is investing in this tool and in our homegrown tools a good idea or not? In the case of a Google or Apple, clearly that is part of their competitive advantage. If you are a bank, though, writing your own, container scheduler, probably not that useful, when there are plenty of great options out there. But I kind of feel, and then we kind of get into the whole idea of, you should have a product manager for your internal platform, right? Somebody who's making the judgment calls about what we should, be allowing our developers to use. But once you get to like being Google or Facebook, maybe you need to have like a VC scout for like, what could we spin out into a separate company, without hurting our competitive advantage. So Google, anecdotally, I've heard there are people inside of Google who are upset about Kubernetes. Their intention with Kubernetes was, we'll get everyone to do things the way we do, and we'll capitalize on it because we're better at it than everyone else. And it turns out everyone else capitalized on it too. Maybe Google doesn't own the entire Kubernetes mindset marketplace, but they're kind of like, won't do that again. And the foot dragging on Istio and Knative kind of lends to that. So maybe they won't show up with like, here's our source control, here's our IDE killer, here's our
even with Kubernetes
code search.
Because that's like the best example is like, kind of the hallway conversation you hear is like, well, yeah, Kubernetes is cool and it's really great. But what's really great? Borg. Borg at Google's like X time. I'm not saying this true. I don't know. I just like you hear it. So even when they roll out the open source version of something, I feel like you often hear it's like, well, actually, that's not the version Google uses. And then they'll be like, the version they have is like, it actually does this and it's a lot better. So I think it's just, I don't blame them.
I mean, Google's not here to be, altruistic for the rest of the industry. They're here to make money. And so the question is, someone made the argument that Kubernetes was going to make them money. So, right. And then, if you go far enough back in the decision tree, somebody was like,
"Yeah, that was the whole documentary, right? That was like
right.
the what was it at the end? That was sort of the climax was like, yeah, and they got the approval from the senior vice president, who's like nameless, to open source it.
But that's my point is they're not just going to give something away. They're going to give something away if they think there's something in it for them. Maybe it's recruiting, whatever. More than likely, they're going to put an interface to their internal thing, BigQuery, and let people just use it without ever seeing the guts. That's
right. But like, it still kind of comes back to like, I guess 2 questions here. Is like, one is like, well, let's just agree for the moment, for sake of argument, was like, everyone believes they have these great tools. And now they have, of course, Google Cloud. And it's like, it doesn't seem like there's a direct relationship where they're like rolling over the exact tools they have internally to GCP. It's more like inspired by Google tools, right? So like that to myself is an interesting question. Like what? Like I don't know. Are they withholding stuff because they still think it's like there's an advantage to it, or is it just
or the code base is monstrous?
It's just like hard, right? And then 2, it's like I don't know. I mean, kind of to your original question, Cote. It's like I think this is just one of these things where they just encountered these problems early on. They were making so much money that in their case, it made total sense to invest in it. And I guess if you were a bank and you were making an insane amount of money, you would maybe you'd solve slightly different problems. Like you want to have the greatest money transfer system that you could possibly have, or the greatest trading system, which I think there are a lot of proprietary trading systems that, you don't hear about.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of those things that are being built out, and that's probably where their money is, but it's not something. It's probably something that when Wall Street traders go to other firms, they probably talk about it like, oh, at this other hedge fund, right?
Yeah.
These great tools, but we don't have them here. We can't buy them.
I think maybe that's the thing is like, maybe I'm being a little too dismissive of the strategic value for this custom bespoke tool chain that Google has. And that value being that they can just rapidly, despite they may not always do this, but when needed, they can rapidly develop new software and then also diagnose what's wrong with it and scale it and have it work, right? My joke always is that's the unspoken user story. User would like software to work. So like it's a pretty.
I was gonna say, wasn't that kind of the promise of what y'all were doing at Pivotal, right? Is we'll give you this tight ecosystem where everything is well integrated. And if you write apps that fit in this, you're going to be able to roll them out faster than before. And
absolutely. And you know what? We didn't even get a drone shot in the Kubernetes documentary.
Not even,
it was terrible.
Not
and
even a software slide.
And so maybe the thing, like you're saying, Brandon, is like in banking, obviously proprietary trading systems. That makes sense. There's probably like they spend a lot of money on, I don't even know what that means, but on software that derives like how they should place investments and trade. And then another area, I remember talking with several people, I bet like fraud detection is another highly like proprietary, it's worth money building up that kind of doing your own stuff there. And then you could think, I guess fraud is a little bit like this, but you could also imagine that like however a bank handles security could also be a huge differentiator. And that's something they wouldn't want to like share. And like, you're not going to go to some security vendor only and just buy some off the shelf security stuff if you're a giant bank. So
yeah, and I think to your banking, before we get off it, I was just gonna say like, there is like probably the best example that I know of is like Renaissance Technologies. So started by, I think it's Jim Simons, and there's a book if you're really interested, you can read it. The Man Who Solved the Market. And so basically, these are the people that kind of started quantitative investing. And if you go through and kind of read that, they built this entire proprietary platform to do all this like crazy algorithmic quantitative investing, but they're super secretive. Like they just hire like super smart physicists, math people, like no finance people, right? And they go in there. And I think that's to your point, right? I think they have this incredible platform for doing that. So it's probably just not something that people talk about, like they talk about Google, or maybe they talk about it in finance circles. So it does exist, but still, I don't know. Before we go, I still think Google, I think it would be willing. Maybe they could just show one thing. Maybe they could just show the source code. Show the source code.
The source
Navigator.
code. That's true.
Well, yeah, Yegi pointed to places like you can get a taste of it here, and it was the Android code browser.
Right, but like, why not? I want to see the real thing. Why doesn't someone just actually go into work one day and be like, I'm gonna crank it up. I'm gonna show you not the one that's. I want to show you the actual real one, and just be like, hey, here's what it is. Like, would it be that secret? Would Google search instantly cave in? I think it would be really interesting to like. I actually want to see their tools, not like something that's kind of a side project. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well, they don't have the source code for this, but like there's those middle chapters in the SRE book where they're like, hey, now we're going to spend 3 chapters showing you something you'll never be able to use in fucking detail. Right. And it's just like, here's the command line tools we use to like diagnose problems. And you're just like reading it and you're like, so cool.
Maybe it is. Maybe that's a good
weird flex.
Yeah. This SRE, I mean, and maybe that's why, like, I don't know. We can talk about, I guess, SRE, like how successful that is outside, but maybe that's why it's so like, because it comes from Google, it's so tied to that. It's like, once you have these tools, right? Like this implementation of this role this would be something no one likes to hear, but like actually the tools help define the role, right? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's like, have all of these tools.
People calling themselves a VMware engineer. I mean,
right. And it's so that's maybe what's going on there. And then, so maybe the book is almost like a head fake. It's like, oh yeah, here's what you should do, but we're not going to give you any of the tools. And that's going to make the job a lot harder.
I think
you're going to inspire a bunch of startups.
It's kind of like, if you go watch a carpentry video and they're like, the first thing you need to do is get a complete carpentry workshop. Now let's walk through this and I'm going to show you how to make a
and
cabinet.
I've got a bag. I've got the cheapest tool bag with, the cheapest hammer, the cheapest screwdriver.
And they're like, why do my cabinets keep coming out crap? Well, did you invest in a complete carpentry workshop and warehouse? Yes. So let's move on to the other thing here, which is like, so is Git really that bad? And it feels like now I've tried to learn how to use Git every now and then. And like, I was going to say, I get it, but it's just sort of like, yeah, whatever. There's some weird language in this, that, and the other, but also I've used the older version control systems and like, they're also like mysterious and weird and they have their own issues. Like, so really like, isn't it just fine? Or am I missing something?
I mean, so the things that came before it were very much focused on, and when I say the things that came before, I'm talking about like, CVS, RCS, Subversion. We're focused on the idea that you have like a one true tree, right? The one true, this is where everybody agrees is the source of our code, and we all go and put it back there. And then, Git kind of flipped that around and said, well, you know what, actually everybody's working on the tree, and we'll just share branches between our trees, and you'll merge them across. And then GitHub was like, that's a bad idea, let's have one single tree. So but there are obviously other tools out there that were built on the idea of distributed trees. But the UX for Git, so what's happening under the covers is amazingly powerful. The idea that you have these directed acyclic graphs where you can remerge stuff and move things around and reconnect at different points in time, and do diffs and bisects. And the problem is, like, it's a hard concept to keep in your head, and the UX isn't very great. And I've never seen another tool that people are like, oh, such and such is better, and then when I see it, I'm like, it's not better enough, right? The jump from Subversion to Git was better enough for large projects with a lot of moving pieces. And what you need is kind of that,
I think that's show me. I think you outlined the reasons. It's like, okay, yes, it's been better than what was before, but like it does feel like, and this is where I guess Google has it, but the rest of the industry, we quote unquote don't. It's like, it just feels like we could move this forward. The whole point, things that you just said is, one, the UI is too complicated, because even now it's like there's you can get a native client for it. You can do stuff on the web and use the command line, and they're all kind of different. And it's a little unclear which does which. Sometimes you have to like do something in the command line. So that part. And then I think what you said, Cote, too, it's like, because I feel the same way. It's like, I've learned it several times. Like, I will say that. And it's like every time I encounter this concept, and I think a lot of people do, it's like you almost have to retrain yourself versus it being something like it's intuitive, right? And I can discover and learn the complexity over time. Like, for example, like just some fictitious source code system was like, well, I just start with the web interface, and it kind of makes it easy for me to like just do my changes and not mess up everyone else's project. But then over time, right, it's like maybe I can discover some of the more complicated things that are more powerful, just like an operating system, right?
GitHub tries to do that, right? Have you ever seen where it's like, would you like to, rebase and merge this patch? Here's the command line if you'd like to see how this works. And you pull it up and you're like, it's like 7 steps. And then you're like, just mash the button. Just mash the button.
I know, right? But just like, I just want to say what you said back to you. It's like, have you ever watched, you said like, have you ever tried like rebase and merge, right?
Oh yeah,
and it's like,
every day.
Like, but I'm just saying, like, just the whole thing, like rebase. It's like,
I know
what, like that.
Do I merge? Do I no fast forward? Do I fast?
I think to myself, you can come up with a concept that's much simpler. Would you like to edit some code and merge it into the project? Like that should, versus like,
would you like to cherry commit a commit?
Like when you start listening to the talk, it's like, it doesn't seem like it has to be this complicated. But and if the bar were a little bit lower, right, then I think maybe you could get more people, more inviting, more people using it to do other stuff, right?
Maybe that is a thing. Again, I don't know what I'm talking about, blah blah blah. But like, it does seem like there's only one way to version software for humans, and that is like, you have the version, like iOS 17 just came out, right? So what is the current version of iOS 17, right? like it's just one chunk of code. Now there's updates, and then it becomes 17.1 or 17.2, and like that's it. And then you could argue that, like, well, we also have a military spec one. And so we have iOS 17 military, and it's like, yep, you sure do. That's a whole other software product, right? And like, and so it does seem like if you're doing version control, it's like you have the current version and other versions, and that's it. And so like, kind of to what you're saying, Brandon, it's just like, so do I want to put this in the current version or another version? And
right, but I mean, even with your iOS example, they've probably got 5,000 developers working on iOS, and they're all not committing to master at the same time. They're working off on feature branches, and then trying to make sure that somebody else's patch lands before their patch, and then they have to integrate it. And then some poor, unfortunate release engineer has the glory of saying that's 17.
Yeah. Well, no, and I'm just thinking, like, in response to what you were saying, Matt Ray, that you get some like crazy ass command line thing, and it's just sort of like, yeah, no one should ever see that. Whatever's going on there.
But that's the thing about Git is any crazy thing you need to do. I've never heard of somebody saying, I can't do what I need to do with Git.
Yeah,
it's eventually they have found the arcane phrasing of combination of commands that will do the crazy ass thing they need to do, and when they get there, they're happy. But the rest of us are like,
so that a benefit of your own proprietary stack, like maybe Google has, is that they can just be like, let's eliminate these crazy ass scenarios.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Like all we do is this is the current version and this is the other versions.
And so, maybe that's the problem.
And then you can chop that off of your tools.
Maybe that's the problem with Git is it can do just about anything. And it's not afraid to show too much to new users.
I do think some of the use cases you jump in, Matt, and tell me I'm wrong here, but I think this idea of like, maybe just learning the source code, like, being able to navigate between different versions and see what's going on and important changes. Like, again, haven't really seen it, but like, it feels like Google has some magic tools that do that. And it's just like you go to a GitHub repo and then you get to the main branch, but then it's like, you want to go back and kind of like understand like what's going on. Like, to me, like, good luck. Like, there's a million different branches and maybe there's some comments or some git push like things, but then if you're doing that a lot, there's just a bunch of like garbage messages, and it just comes back to like, I just feels like a place where the software could do so much more for us sits within source control. And I feels like why we've just stopped with Git, like why we're like,
this
a lot of work. Good enough.
That's the problem.
It seems wrong, right?
Because I'm sure there's some golden path demo that GitHub sales engineers give where they're like, hey, here's here's our your enterprise application, and it's got 15 developers working on it, and when and here's what this developer's doing, and look, here's a container running their build, and you can click to the UI and see all the tests passing, and you can get the full change logs of it as it comes in. It's like, yeah, you could do that with just about anything, but it's a lot of work to get all that set up. And I feel like Google's advantage, or even going back to like a Cloud Foundry, their advantage is if you can keep people on a happy path, you can invest in that path. If you don't have to support edge cases, you can make better guardrails for the happy path and make it a more pleasant experience. You can pave that thing. You can put speed lines or whatever, and it just continues to get better and better. And
I think what we need to do here is ask, like, Google did this basically for Google Docs. For any complaints about Google Docs, like the idea that you can collaboratively edit and like somehow it just like keeps track of everyone's versions and just works. That is so much far superior than the Microsoft version where like no matter what you do, it's like always save your work. You're just like never sure if the SharePoint, Office 365 is going to actually retain your changes or not. But like somehow it all works in Google Docs. So maybe just a plea to the Google people. It's like, why don't you free us all from Git?
No.
Spin out your source control greatness.
Here's the pitch. So I was saying earlier, you've got product managers for your internal platforms, and they should have this VC scout guy looking at what can they spin out to make money. The way you make money is you productize what Google's doing as a pitch against GitHub and Microsoft, because that's Microsoft. It's not GitHub, it's Microsoft. So if you want to re-engage with developers, if you think there's value in owning the developer toolchain for the future, maybe you should get people off of GitHub. So what can Google do?
There you go. That's the common enemy. It's actually GitHub, right? Because that has all this. It's become the de facto repository for everything. So yeah, Google comes out. I like it. I'm already feeling it, man.
I mean, because it ties into AI.
We're right there.
We're ready. Open source.
Absolutely. We put a little Bard interface on that. Like, I think we need to get this ready.
I'm telling you, 2024.
Absolutely.
Instead of the SRE book from Google, you have the software developer handbook from Google, and all it is all those middle chapters that Cote hates are like, here's how we do it.
I love it.
And then, but late 2024, boom, it's GitHub.
We're gonna free you from the tyranny of Git.
Don't put me in marketing. GitHub.
That will be so simple. Everyone can write it. I love it. This is such a great idea. We shouldn't even give it away. We may have to cut this part of the podcast. It's such a fantastic idea.
Sorry, streamers.
Yeah,
well, this is
I don't. It needs a better name. I guess we'll have to
No, it
come up with a
doesn't.
different name. Google Hub.
You tell me GitHub is a good name? No.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, this is just some lead gen marketing for our software defined talk management consulting firm, and private equity consulting firm as well. And before we move on, I just want to point out something that we glossed over, which is like, I feel like it's called a happy path because you're happy when you're on it. And so if you find yourself not being on the happy path, you should consider why you're on the sad path. Like, it's probably good to just stay on that predefined thing that tends to work out. Just like everything we were just talking about. I'm sure in the Google world, they're like, why don't you just do things the Google way, and then you'll be happy.
And then everybody who leaves is always like, I miss the Google way.
I'm so sad.
That's the most universal exit interview of Google. It's like, I really miss the tools at Google. That's always 100%. 100% former Googlers say that.
Well, speaking of missing things, it seems like, as always, our friends up there in Chicago, the 37 Signals people, are bringing back the it looks like, maybe, I don't know if they're bringing back the EULA, but they're just bringing up the straight license software. And I want to, this is a new pet peeve of mine in the what are we in the 2020s? Is I think I've expressed this before, but I don't have a name for it yet. But I want to just lay it out. Is I believe that pre-announcing should just not be done unless there's a reason for it. Now, I understand, like, for example, when you need to pre-announce something because you're going to have developer access, because you want the developers in your ecosystem to start developing applications for it, as you see with like Apple and other companies. That's totally cool, right? Like, that's not a problem. But if you're just going to announce, like they did, that like, we're going to come up with this great new pricing scheme, check in later, bros.
All right, so let's do so everyone gets it. So this is our friends over at 37 Signals and DHH. So it's introducing once, all capitalized. Coach, no need to yell it. I think we got some feedback on the head.
I didn't even think of that. That's a good idea.
Okay, so it's part of that. Okay, so this is the quick bullet point. So this is what they're going to offer: pay one time, own forever. They write the code, and I guess we all get to see it. So some type of source code access. They give us the software. And we can host it. It's simple and straightforward, not enterprising and bloated, and all for one fixed price. So I get it. I understand the pitch. It's very straightforward, but I do think this is, I guess, where I like the fact they've pre-announced it, because we can kind of do a little bit of speculation, and also too, like, we can see where we're wrong. Because to me, there just seems to be certain laws of software. It's like, okay, once you've written the software, it almost always requires ongoing maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to fix stuff, right? And you have to find a way for people to continue to pay you to evolve the software. So there seems to only be there's a finite set of models. And this is why I think this is interesting. It's like, if really it's pay one time, then obviously SaaS is out. Obviously our traditional maintenance, where you would pay 20% of license costs every year, that's out. So you're only left with, you either have to pay a very high amount the first time so that they have enough funds to continue to support the software, or they kind of do the trick of every version you have to buy. So version 1 is
the trick. Otherwise known as all software before 2010.
But I would say this is where the App Store, all the people myself included who've ever tried to build an app, it's like, if you just let someone buy it one time, and you're never going to get more money for it ever, right? Then all you can do is deprecate that and then rename it, be totally. Version number 2. So which
version
is
2 is a paid upgrade.
Yeah, I mean, a paid upgrade, it's that's fine. I mean, paid upgrades happen all the time. I'm not against it. But that seems to be the fine. What I just listed there is, I believe, all the models. So it's this is why I kind of like the idea of first guessing. Is they going to introduce something we have not thought of? Is there new ground?
It's going to be once version 2 is a paid upgrade.
Is it going to be that simple? So it's
going to be that simple. It has. There's no alternative.
And I think I forgot about the code part. Maybe that's the other fun thing is we're not doing open source, but you can see the code.
Well, that's fine. Source available.
Sure. It's new, right? It's just a little. Yes, it's just a little twist on the thing. To use Brandon had the good analogy, selling in the App Store, but you could also say Adobe Creative Suite. In retrospect, everyone's like, huh, it'd be cool to pay like $1,200 every 5 to 10 years for my core tool chain instead of paying, maybe my
300 a
math's all
year.
messed up,
Yeah.
but yeah, like 300 to 450 a year, just ongoing, right? Like, which is sort of like, yes, that does make sense. I think maybe like renting as a land, you don't want to rent if, in the longer you rent, generally the worse off things are. So renting is not cool,
Totally
versus
about
just
it.
like a one-time payment for stuff. So yeah, I mean, going back to just, I'm just going to call it like licensed software, then sure. Yeah. And if we change the word, maintenance to just support, then yeah, you can pay extra to get support, right? You could pay once you could pay a fee, and then you don't get any bug fixes, or you don't get support
I
for it. That's a
I
separate service.
I think Brian's comment from the chat is spot on. It's got to be in-app purchases. Would you like to buy your feature working?
Now, for as much as we're saying it's like, what is it, a nothing burger, like a not news thing?
Yeah.
I guess it is. Like, what would be interesting is to see if like it works out and then it spreads to other people, right? Because there is
It's
a
already
bit.
there. That's the point. They're slapping a new label on
Yeah.
all the software you purchase in an app store.
Right, like,
Everything that is version 5, and then when version 6 comes out, they're like,
Yeah.
it's a paid upgrade.
I was gonna say that's the biggest question here. Like, if it's just paid upgrades, which is just another version of maintenance, right? That's all it is. If it's just literally relabeling it, then I think there is absolutely nothing here. But because that is such an obvious conclusion, right? And I do think these people are smart. I'm like, what are we missing? Like, are we just too close-minded? Like, no, they're actually going to, like, because I guess what would be the bold move would be like, you pay $100 and you never pay.
But the bold
right?
move here is they have to insulate themselves from the cost of maintaining, version 1 of their one software. They can't let you have it for 100. They're going to have to charge 200 because they're going to have to maintain.
I agree, but that's what I'm saying. Like, because we know this, and I believe this is the only analysis you can come to. Like, they are smart. They must. The only other thing I can stretch my mind to is to be like, you could do it this way. You could treat all sales as essentially lead gen and be like, my targeted addressable market is like massive. So all I need to do, right, is just every year I need to essentially sell X amount, and I'm going to continue to support everyone because my sales continue to increase, right? So it's like, I just sort of package it together because, like, maybe this year I sell 100 copies, next year's 1,000, next year's 10,000, and it's all like a rounding
like a Ponzi
error,
scheme,
right? Yeah, and it does, because it does run out. That's the point. You're like,
yeah.
Because all healthy,
it does run out though.
Right. Well, we know all healthy, old school, all healthy software businesses. When you met with the finance people, they would tell you after 3 years of your enterprise software being out there, you should get 50% of your revenue from maintenance and 50% from new sales, right? And then the longer it goes, the more that it's a little bit more maintenance. And they would always be on you, be like, hey, the maintenance isn't coming in, like your product's not doing well. So that's why I'm like, I don't know. This is, I guess, this idea of like defying gravity to me a little bit is like, okay, I'm all for it. Like, I'm great. If there's some way to like, if there's some way to levitate, or, what was the thing about superconductors or something, like, fine, I'm all for it. But like, I literally, my mind is so closed, I cannot figure out what the next missing.
I mean, it's got to be just like we're saying. It's just licensed software, and you can pay for support and upgrades, and then there's a new version, and you got to pay for that. But I think the more important thing is, hopefully, this means that we can run Hey in an air-gapped environment at some point. I think is what we really should be focusing on.
But we'll be pronouncing Hey differently in 5 years.
There probably will also be licensing where AWS can't just run Hey as a competitor. that would probably be wise as well.
That's going to be the first thing. Now that you brought that up, the first thing I'm going to do when some of this one software comes out is just like read through the EULA to see, can I just slap this on the marketplace with my own wrapper around it, run it as a service?
Right, and then AWS will run Hey, and they'll call it what? I think.
Hey, what?
Oh my gosh.
Well, I just before we get to the back part of the show, I just want to touch on. I think there's been a valuable data point in the whole work from home versus work in the office thing, where I think the CEO of Salesforce, the Benioff guy, there's a bunch of stuff said, but I'm going to summarize what I think he recently said about work from home. We have no fucking idea which one's good or bad. I think, and I think there's a lot of credibility to the CEO of Salesforce saying that, like, I don't know, it's good for some people and not good for other people, because they spent a butt ton of money building out the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And so for him, I don't know, maybe he wasn't consulting with his media training coach at the time, which is totally his prerogative. But it seems like, to basically be like, oh yeah, those millions and millions that we spent, whatever. Like, I don't know. It seems like there's some accuracy
I felt
there.
like this was the most reasonable take. It's like, it's sort of evolving back to maybe where it all started, was like, you know what? This is a case by case decision. Everyone's just going to have to kind of figure it out for each kind of like team or small organization within the company. We'll just have to figure out what makes sense. Like, I feel like that's kind of where we started pre-pandemic, and I think that's kind of where we're going to end up.
And
emails.
It also, like, his exact quote, well, not exact quote, but one of his quotes was, "I am a remote worker. I've always been a remote worker my whole life. I don't work well in an office. It just doesn't work with my personality." Now, he is famously, wasn't he like one of the, if not the top salesperson at Oracle, right? So he's a salesperson, basically. And it's something else I've been rolling around my head a lot, is like, at a lot of companies, executives spend a lot of their time traveling. So they're not really even in the office that much, right? And so it does seem like, if a high-level executive is saying you should come into the office, maybe they should come into the office and like stay in there. And my other snarky reply is like, I'd be happy to come into the office if you actually gave me an office when I got there, instead of just like some desk. That would be fantastic. Like, there's nothing to come to when I go to the office. It's just like whatever the fuck a flex work environment is, where I've got to reserve a desk, which seems.
Well, you got to give Benioff quote. Like, I had to triple check that quote wasn't made up, because I was like, this seems so contradictory to what has already been said by him. But I guess he said it, so I guess
so honest.
I mean, it's like, I don't know, like, good honesty, crazy.
Yeah, we'll have to ask Bart and George if there's something in the Hawaii water supply that brings out honesty and concision. There must be a Hawaiian word for that we don't know. Well, speaking of Hawaiian words that we don't know, Brandon, do we have any bureaucracy this episode?
Just a couple things. I wanted to thank Michael, who wrote in. I sent him some stickers. He's in Sweden, and I also sent some stickers to, hopefully I'm saying it's right, Borco in Canada. So if you would like a sticker, all you have to do is send your postal address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com, and I will be happy to send you a sticker anywhere in the world. And I also wanted to point out, I think last week I recommended, Just 1 Mile, which was about this ultra marathon. So Jan recommends this Rich Roll interview. It's about mindset secrets from the world's best ultra runner. His name, I think, Courtney DeWalter. So if you want to hear more about, and I did listen to the episode, so if you want to hear about ultra running and how these people do it, you can check that out. So appreciate Jan sending in the recommendation.
Well, there's a lot of conferences coming up. Some interesting ones. I'll be traveling a lot, but if you want to get a list of the ones we think are great, you should go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/433, where you can also join the Slack channel and all of those things. Lots of good discussion there. Now, Brandon, what do you have to recommend this episode?
My recommendation, so it's kind of a follow-up. So this past couple weeks have been the rollout of the NFL. So that's American football for all the international listeners. So I switched over to YouTube TV. I was a little worried about it in the NFL Sunday Ticket. I will say this, though. Whatever the YouTube team did to get ready, they did it all perfectly. Absolutely fantastic. YouTube TV has been great, and the rollout of the NFL Sunday Ticket has been great. And a couple things that like jumped out at me is sort of like, once you kind of free yourself from traditional cable, is like, one, the idea that like numbered channels is just a completely made up thing. Like, we don't need it when you just sort of like, they just give you a grid of all the games. You just like press on it. I mean, again, it's obvious, but it was super nice. They have a nice live grid, though, if you're trying to make the transition for maybe people that really like the cable interface. So you can kind of give that to people, but it's also just sort of a way to be like, oh, I don't need to use this stupid live grid. I can just search what I want. And then, of course, if you're a big football fan or any type of someone likes to watch multiple things at once, they have this idea of multi-box. They basically will just take all the games that are playing simultaneously and they'll put them in a multi-box. So you can watch 4 or 5 simultaneously. And in true software fashion, so like, for example, on Sundays, there'll be 8 games that are being played simultaneously, they will give you every combination of 4 games. So it's like the ultimate software solution. It's like, no, you don't need to pick it. I'll just give you every combination. You just pick the combination of games that you want. So really great job by YouTube. I'm really impressed by them. I'm all bought in. And if you want to hear more about all of this, you should listen to the guys over at Sharp Tech. That's like Ben Thompson. And they've done a lot of discussion about the strategy and kind of where YouTube is going. And I'm suddenly like, I think the cable bundle may be unbundled and rebundled by YouTube when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think over the last year, I've learned more about the NBA and the NFL than I've ever known just by listening to the Sharp Tech podcast.
As you should, absolutely should. It's been fantastic. I love it.
Now, do they have like a schizophrenia version where you can have all the audio from all the things at the same time?
That would probably be called Red Zone. Red Zone version is where they just switch the games continuously to who's about to score. So if you look down for 1 second.
Well, that's the ADHD version. Yeah.
This is ADHD.
I want to have 4 games simulcast audio at the same time.
No, it's fantastic. You just slide around for the audio. I wonder if they could do that. Maybe for you, Matt Ray, they could put it in. But YouTube, again,
good job.
Absolutely.
Good job.
I have to say, and Matt Ray, you've said a lot of things. Like, we have made fun of things Google has killed off. I think we have made fun of this a lot, but man, did they get this thing right. So for please don't kill off the NFL Sunday Ticket. That's my only please.
It's so
Google,
doomed.
I'll forgive you for Google Reader if you just don't mess up this. You've done a good job. Just keep it like it is. Fantastic.
How about yourself, Matt Ray? What do you have to recommend?
Well, I don't have nearly the passion for my recommendation Brandon does, but I have a travel pro tip here. I was flying back from the U.S. Over the weekend, and my connecting flight was running late. I was going to miss my flight back to Sydney, and I was sitting on this American flight, and I realized, wait a second, they've got American Airlines Wi-Fi, so I could talk to the American Airlines website. I got on with chat, and I was able to get them to change my flight while I was on my flight.
Oh, that's clever.
Which I'd never kind of occurred to me. So, I still, my bag still didn't make it on the plane, but I was able to, run across LAX and get a different connection, the last flight of the night back to Sydney. So that's my pro tip advice is don't forget about that, the customer service chat. Because usually that's pretty pointless.
Good. Yeah. That is a good tip. Well, my recommendation is a book by this guy, Russell Davies. He's part of the, let's say the mid 2000s United Kingdom interesting web crew. There's a bunch of them scurrying around that you might see here and there. And it's a new book he has called Do Interesting. And it's all about, like, if you want to, the title's pretty descriptive. I think his whole life philosophy is like, you should be interested in and also participate in creating stuff that's interesting. And so he's got it's kind of like a life philosophy of going through doing that, and even some tools of how to do it and think through it. Now, people who have been doing interesting stuff, obviously like us with the podcast that this has been around on the web, you'll kind of read through it and be like, yeah, sounds good. Tell me something I don't know. But his style of presenting it and stuff, I think it's good enough that it's kind of worth reading through. Plus, he's got some interesting examples of it. I just want to say it does fall into the trap that I really don't like in books like this, which is like there'll be a whole chapter and it's like, I asked Susan about this. And then the whole rest of the chapter is Susan's comments on it. And it's just like, that's a little bit of cheating, but whatever. It's still good. Do Interesting by Russell Davies. Speaking of doing interesting, you've done something very interesting, which is listen to a full episode of Software Defined Talk. It would be even more interesting if you scrubbed to this part of the audio and you're still listening to it. Either way, you win interesting bingo. If you want to get the show notes for this episode, you can go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/433. You should subscribe to it. And as I like to recommend, anytime you have access to a device that can subscribe to a podcast, whether it's yours, the one in an airport, or maybe someone dropped it down their seat on an airplane and you're retrieving it, you should subscribe to this podcast by just looking up Software Defined Talk and smash that subscribe button. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, thanks for everyone on the stream today. Unfortunately, we have to go, but it was good to see Brian and Brett and everyone else who joined us. We will be streaming next week, maybe a little earlier on Wednesday. So maybe you'll have to watch us during your early work meetings.
Calisthenics.
All right. We'll talk to you next time.